Hey guys, Pieguyrulz here, and I just saw the SpongeBob movie 2, Sponge Out of Water. This video, I should give a few prefaces. First of all, this is just my raw, unfiltered opinion after seeing it once in the theater. My opinion totally has every right to change after I see it a number of times, after I'm able to, pause it and rewind it and all that sort of stuff. It's possible I missed things in the theater, there were other people there, so you know. So this is just kind of a first impressions type review. So there we go. Also, the first part of this is going to be spoiler free, and the second part will be spoilery. I'll be sure to give you a heads up when we're going to switch over. So, yes, did I enjoy it? I did. I did like this movie, and I've got some kind of notes here to just go through. Just some questions that I prepared, you know. So first of all, how was the plot? The plot was interesting. It wasn't perfect. There were some parts where it really kind of went off on some tangents. Also, I'm not entirely sure if some of the logic of some things line up, and of course SpongeBob logic, but I'm talking about the logic of the narrative. There's some things that, I don't know, after I see it a few more times, I gotta really see if it makes sense. Yeah, but otherwise, it's an interesting plot. There's a lot of interesting facets to it. It's not a simple plot. And it works in its favor because all you really need is an interesting plot. It doesn't need to be the tightest plot in the world. It doesn't need to have, tons of twists and turns, but it has enough. It has enough twists. It's interesting. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. SpongeBob doesn't need any sort of intricate, crazy plot. Though if it's more than 11 minutes long, it does need a plot, and this movie certainly has one. So next up, how was the comedy? And this is the big one. If you know me, SpongeBob and comedy, it's got to be comedic. It's got to have a lot of comedy, and it does. It genuinely and honestly does, and it has jokes that range from making fun of SpongeBob's laugh. It actually makes fun of SpongeBob's laugh, to just all sorts of physical gags, sight humor, wordplay. Just everything you'd expect from SpongeBob is there. It definitely made me laugh almost all the way through. Pretty hard too at some points. This is probably like the most I've laughed at SpongeBob. Well, I've just been watching season 6, so. But yeah, the comedy was there. I felt like in most places, the only time that I felt the comedy was just really kind of in a dry spot was once they go up on land. And I think that's partially because the trailers just spoiled the heck out of that. But also partially, I feel like it went into a really, really slapsticky area, like only slapstick. Like the characters were getting kicked around and jumping about and doing all sorts of stuff that you'd expect like CGI characters to do. That small CGI characters that get kicked and stuff. That wasn't the most funny, and the punchlines that were there, like SpongeBob and Patrick running around in the cotton candy, that was spoiled in the trailer. And again, that's not really the movie's fault, but that's. That was really the only place that I felt was kind of comedically lacking. Not to say that there were some jokes I didn't find funny, but overall, I think there was enough that made me laugh pretty consistently throughout. And I should also mention that the live action stuff, that is definitely the last, I'd say maybe fourth, fifth of the movie. That definitely is not a large part of it. All right, so next up, the animation. Speaking of, it was really cool. SpongeBob, I believe I heard one of the people say in an interview that SpongeBob's always kind of been like a multimedia show. And it kind of has. They've always done live action gags on the show. They've done puppetry. They've done stop motion. They've done CG. They've always done that sort of stuff. And they do it here pretty well. They have a few different styles of animation they use throughout this, like some during the credits, some during certain sequences, which I'm not going to spoil. And then of course there's the CG live action stuff. So it's nice and varied, but the core animation is a slightly modified version of the television animation. I would say it's probably halfway between the first movie animation and the show's animation. Just in terms of style, like there's definitely some differences. I'm not big into animation, like noting the techniques and stuff, but I will say it looked fresh and different while still being very distinctly SpongeBob. I'll say that. Next up, how were the characters? And if you've seen my the first movie review that I did for the first movie, You know that one of my biggest complaints was that they just completely underused the characters. Aside from SpongeBob and Patrick, everyone else got very little to nothing to do. In this movie, I'll tell you, it's a buddy movie between SpongeBob and Plankton. Plankton is in a lot of this movie. He has a lot to do. And in addition to that, yes, as you've seen in the trailers, the movie is about a team up. It is about SpongeBob trying to bring his friends together. So I wouldn't say characters like Sandy, Patrick, and Mr. Krabs have a lot to do, but they're there. They are predominantly featured, and Squidward as well. They are predominantly featured. Mrs. Puff gets her obligatory one line per movie, but that's fine. Pearl gets a line during the credits, and that's about it. But yeah, every character in this definitely has a character. It's not like they just get, of the main seven, really aside from Gary, all of them get something to do. Like Sandy has something to do in this movie. Patrick has things to do in this movie. And that brings me to the fact that of all the characters in this movie, Patrick was the one that annoyed me the most. They definitely went with the newer season model of Patrick, where he's not a good person. He's just not a good friend or anything. Yeah. But everyone else, SpongeBob was surprisingly mature in this movie. I mean, it was still definitely SpongeBob. He still had his childish moments, but comparing to the first movie, because that's not what this movie was about. That was what the first movie was about, him being a child. Compared to that, SpongeBob was, infinitely more mature. All right, so moving on. How does it compare to the first? Honestly, going off first impressions here, I kind of like this movie more. I thought it went to a lot of different and interesting places that the first movie kind of didn't. The first movie kind of did its own thing. It did the hero's journey, but this one definitely, you see a lot more of Bikini Bottom. You see a lot more of the characters. There's a lot of things that happen. It's not just SpongeBob and Patrick encountering a bunch of tough, characters and monsters and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of different weird parts of this movie, which make it more interesting. And in terms of comedy, I think it might just be funnier than the first. But again, I've seen the first movie probably 20, 30, 40 times at this point. I've seen it a lot. And this movie I've only just seen once. So, this movie does have the benefit of being new. But yes, so before I get into the spoiler material, I would very much recommend this. It definitely, the last thing I should note is that it definitely has a lot of nods to the series, and I'll talk about that more in the spoilery section, but it definitely honors where it came from. It feels like a SpongeBob episode, but longer. And also, I'll talk about that in the spoilery section. But I do very much recommend it. I do think it'd be a great movie for anyone who's a SpongeBob fan. If you're not a SpongeBob fan, I mean, you wouldn't be watching this. But in terms of just a movie on its own, I don't know. That's the sort of thing I'd need to watch it a few more times to kind of really see. But there's definitely some jokes in there for like adults and stuff, like making fun of SpongeBob's laugh, how annoying it is. That was definitely a joke for the older audience. All right, so now I'm gonna get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie and you still plan on seeing it, please click away. All right. So, wow, there was a lot of references in this movie. Let me try to think. Let's see. Flats the Flounder appears in the credits of all characters. Finally, I get my SpongeBob movie with Flats in it. Like a large part of this movie is a reference to fun. Like Plankton's TM work and them singing about it, and Plankton changing what SpongeBob sings into something violent. That is ripped directly from fun. And I believe also the Krusty Krab bylaws are either directly quoted from or heavily paraphrased, or lightly paraphrased, I guess, from Imitation Crabs. I'm trying to think what else. There was a ton of other little moments. Like there wasn't anything aside from maybe the fun and the Imitation Crabs. I wouldn't say there was any other direct references. But there was a lot of stuff that was similar to stuff on the show, like Krabs being a robot in the climax. And again, once I see the movie more, I'll be able to definitely, that could be a whole video in itself, pointing out all the times in the movie where, it has something to do with the show. Um, but yeah, man, I was definitely, I would say, the parts I was talking about earlier that I don't know make sense. I mean, they use time travel, which is always a red flag of logic. And then the Krabby Patty formula goes missing because the pirate guy wrote it out, although I don't actually remember him writing it out, and how he was telling the story, but then the story was real. And it's a little weird, if you think about it like that. And I'm sure the benefit of having only seen it once, that's definitely going to weigh in this movie's favor for right now, in terms of the plot. I'm trying to think of what I laughed the hardest at. I mean, there was some great stuff like SpongeBob letting Squidward keep the six pack. That joke about SpongeBob's laugh, that was really good towards the beginning, especially because it was like a slow burn on that joke. Another reference, Gary being king. That may be a reference to Rule of Dumb, apparently. Oh, also, the Krusty Krab is buried in sand, which might be a reference to Spongehenge. I'm trying to think of one. It's so hard, man, because you see the movie and I can't take any notes, but I definitely was laughing throughout. Um, mm, I don't know. I'm trying to think if I have anything else to talk about. Oh yeah, the pirate guy, Antonio Banderas. He was they played him almost exactly like an evil version of Patchy. Like apparently they only know how to write one live action pirate character, and that's the one you see there. That's the pirates we saw in the first movie, the really overly animated, as if they are actually animated, character. And when I say he's like Patchy, I mean that in a good way. I mean that in all of the good Patchy ways. I think he did a fantastic job, as the pirate. I think he fit right in with the with SpongeBob and gang. I mean, he even gets his bird companions. This time being seagulls. One of which was voiced by is his name Kevin Michael Richardson? The guy with the really deep voice. That I kind of liked his shtick with that. That was all right. That was very reminiscent of Potty. Yeah, I guess what I really want to talk about here is the climax. And I really kind of want to get into the live action stuff, and that I think that was the weakest part of the movie. To be completely honest, the action scene was all right, but I wasn't loving it. And again, part of this could be because a lot of it was in the trailer, so I was just kind of sick of seeing it. But I do think that the movie just kind of comes to a little bit of a halt once they get onto the land. I wish, I don't know, I wish it was just all underwater. They could have done some CG and stuff. And as much as I do like the pirate, Antonio Banderas, I don't know, I feel like there could have maybe been a better antagonist for this movie. I don't know, I just... Oh yeah, and then there's the one other thing I wanted to talk about. The epic rap battles, guys. And the fact that the ending was an epic rap battle between the dolphin and the seagulls. What was that? I mean, it was cool. Like, it wasn't bad, but that was just like first of all, having that dolphin there, when they time travel and they see the dolphin, somehow apparently time traveling landed them in outer space. I think that was outer space. It was outer space, but SpongeBob had bubbles following him, so I guess it was enclosed in water, yet somehow rubble fell on... I'm overthinking it. Anyway, that part in and of itself was just really random and really out there. And then to have him come back... Well, he does come back in a relevant way, but then to have him come back again to do an epic rap battle... I think it's Antonio Banderas that even acknowledges that they're stretching out the movie at this point, which I'm thinking to myself... Yeah, they probably, this is filler. I mean, it's kind of cool filler, but yeah, the movie really just, like, trails off. And I guess I should talk a little bit about Plankton as well, how I feel. I was very happy with what they did with Plankton. I mean, after all the time they spent building up him and SpongeBob and TM work and all that stuff, if he were to turn on them when he was holding the formula, if he were to turn on them right then, it would be just so... Like, it would make so much of the rest of the movie feel pointless, and it would feel like such a betrayal. Like, yeah, that's something Plankton would do, but, like, you spent so much time in the movie building this up, it would be really cheap to just kind of have him do that. So I'm glad he didn't do that there. That being said, he does in the very end, which is annoying that they feel like they had to do the status quo thing, which, I guess... on the one hand, it's annoying. On the other hand, I guess it's nice that they wanted to make it fit into the show, which, by the way, technically makes this a prequel because there's no Krusty Krab 2. Um, but yeah, but the fact that during the big kind of like moment of friendship, he didn't turn on them. Him turning on them at the end was just kind of a mechanic of the show. I mean, he even says, "I'm just trying to return things to the status quo," or something like that. That's just a mechanic of the weird SpongeBob has these rules and they can't change them. And obviously, I wouldn't want them to like make Plankton a good guy, but yeah, I'm glad that they didn't have him turn at that moment. And I think him turning at the end doesn't hinder the power of if this were a movie where things actually were allowed to change, Plankton would become a good guy. Man, he's really heartless to Karen too. At that one point, I was just thinking, man, he just doesn't care about her at all. I mean, he sheds a tear, but that's literally all we get. Whatever. But I mean, regardless, his character was definitely nicely expanded on. I mean, his arc was a longer version of fun. Absolutely. I mean, that's probably if there was one episode that this movie was based on, it would probably be fun. Which is no surprise because Hillenburg wrote half this, so yeah. But yeah, good movie. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on it. Yeah, Pieguyrulz out.